Don't say my husband's dead. What is your name, ma'am? Blood everywhere. My name's Wendi.
October 7th, 2000, Phoenix, Arizona. Wendi Andriano and her husband Joe are just getting back at around midnight from a family friend's barbecue. From the outside looking in, their life and little family seemed perfect. However, the reality was, Wendi Andriano hated what her life had become. She hated her terminally ill husband of only 4 years and hated the additional responsibilities that came with her caregiver role. Her multiple failed attempts to secure a life insurance policy under Joe's name further angered her. There was no reason to keep him around. By the end of the night, Joe would be brutally beaten, stabbed, and poisoned by Wendi. But before we begin this story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay connected. In the warm summer of 1970, on the 6th of August, the world welcomed Wendi Elizabeth Ochoa. Wendi grew up in a very strict and religious household. She moved many times in her childhood and once mentioned she was sexually assaulted by her father. This, however, was never confirmed. As the years passed, Wendi's life took a significant turn when she met and married Joseph Andriano in January 1994. Their love story, however, was soon tested by fate. Joe, not long after their vows, began to show signs of a mysterious ailment. The couple went from one doctor to another seeking answers. He had 3 surgeries, all with a misdiagnosis. It wasn't until 1998 that they received the heart-wrenching news. Joe had adenoid cystic carcinoma, and by this time it had progressed to a terminal stage. Desperate to find a cure, Joe turned to holistic therapies, hoping for a miracle. But as the new millennium dawned, he had no choice but to undergo chemotherapy. Amidst this turmoil, Wendi found solace in the birth of their 2 children. She worked as an apartment manager, trying to provide for her family. But the weight of her responsibilities began to take a toll on her. Not because she had to watch her husband suffer, but because she did not want to have that life. She wanted someone financially secure to take care of her, not the other way around. They say marriage is through sickness and in health, but Joe witnessed firsthand who he really married. Wendi sought escape in the nightlife, drifting away from her family and into the arms of strangers. She met several different men and would either tell them that her husband died or that she wasn't even married. She didn't even try to hide her infidelity. She would grope and kiss men outwardly at bars and even bring them home to have intercourse. It did not matter to her that her 2 young children and dying husband resided there.
The other 2 women currently on death row are Wendi Andriano and Shauna Ford. Andriano bludgeoned her 33-year-old husband to death with a bar stool and then slit his throat.
In a twist of fate, during the summer and early autumn of 2000, Wendi hatched a plan to secure a life insurance policy for Joe. Her actions were shrouded in deceit, as she audaciously denied Joe's battle with cancer during the pre-screening processes. On the 6th of September, an unsuspecting insurance agent reached out to Joe, who, sensing something amiss, declined any interest. Yet, Wendi's determination knew no bounds. From her personal email, she sent a message to the company, demanding Joe's application be reinstated and all further communications be directed to her. Her web of deception grew as she went to Plan B and sought out 2 men she had affairs with to impersonate Joe for the insurance physical, even dangling the tempting sum of $50,000 as bait. However, her plans crumbled when both men, sensing her dark intentions, refused. Despite her relentless efforts, the life insurance remained just out of her grasp. On the night of October 7th, 2000, at midnight, the Andrianos settled their children into bed, marking the beginning of a series of events that would forever change their lives. At approximately 2:15 a.m., the silence of the apartment complex was interrupted by a call from Wendi to Chris, a fellow resident and co-worker. Wendi's voice conveyed a sense of urgency, hinting at a medical emergency involving Joe. Chris, upon arriving at the scene, was met with a distraught Wendi who cryptically stated, "My husband's on the floor dying and I haven't called 911 yet." The gravity of the situation became clear when Chris entered the apartment, finding Joe in a dire state, struggling for breath. Joe was in a fetal position, clearly very weak, and he had just vomited everywhere. Mustering up all the strength he had, he told Chris that he had needed help for some time, and he wanted to know why the paramedics were taking over 45 minutes. Chris seemed to be the only one extremely concerned for Joe. He left to go wave down the paramedics. As the distant sound of sirens grew closer, Wendy's behavior took a perplexing turn. She vehemently objected to the paramedics' presence, barring them from entering the apartment for at least an hour. Despite persistent attempts by Chris and the paramedics to gain access, the door remained sealed. In a perplexing twist, Wendi chose to exit the apartment not through the main entrance, but via the back door. She navigated around the building, appearing before Chris and the paramedics with a changed appearance, her previously dry shirt now damp and her hair wet. She spoke of Joe's terminal cancer diagnosis and his explicit wish against resuscitation, leading the paramedics to make the difficult decision to leave without rendering aid. However, the night's events took a darker turn. At 3:39 a.m., another 911 call was placed, leading the same paramedics back to the scene. They were met with a harrowing sight. Wendi, her shirt stained with blood, conversing with a police officer. Inside the apartment, the grim reality was laid bare. Joe lay motionless, surrounded by evidence of a violent altercation. The subsequent investigation revealed a series of chilling discoveries. In the dimly lit confines of the apartment, the scene was one of sheer horror. As the paramedics pushed open the door, their eyes were immediately drawn to Joe, sprawled lifelessly on the cold floor, his lifeblood pooling around him. The severity of his injuries was evident. A chilling gash on the left side of his neck and brutal cuts on his head, revealing glimpses of his brain beneath. Detective Mitchell, a seasoned investigator with the Phoenix Police Department, arrived shortly after. His experienced gaze took in the scene, noting the drying blood around Joe's head, a testament to the amount of time that had elapsed since the attack. Nearby, a shattered bar stool lay discarded, its wooden legs stained with blood. The remnants of a once functional lamp, a kitchen knife smeared with blood, a soiled pillow, and a discarded belt added layers to the grim tableau. Following a meticulous autopsy, the chief pathologist ascertained that Joe had endured significant brain trauma, resulting from at least 23 forceful hits to the rear of his skull. Between 8 to 10 of these strikes were potent enough to potentially knock him into unconsciousness. However, the presence of defensive marks on Joe's hands and wrists implied he had been alert during some portion of the assault. In addition to these injuries, Joe had a deep gash on the left side of his neck. This wound reached his vertebral column and cut through the vital carotid artery. The pathologist believed that the head injuries preceded the knife wound, and that while Joe might have been unconscious, he was still breathing when he was stabbed. Lab tests also detected the presence of sodium azide in Joe's bloodstream and stomach contents. The official cause of death was determined to be a combination of the blunt force injuries and the knife wound. From the blood patterns and additional clues at the scene, Detective Mitchell from the Phoenix Police Department deduced that Joe had been in a stationary position during the assault and hadn't attempted to rise. The detective also surmised, noting the lack of blood spray on the belt and knife, that these items were placed next to Joe after he had already passed. Conversely, the presence of blood on the bar stool indicated it was nearby when the significant blood flow started. This suggested foul play. Wendi had started beating Joe, hitting him over 23 times in the head with the bar stool. Then she stabbed him, and then she staged the crime scene and called 911.
So how many times do you think you hit her?
The investigation took a darker turn when the police delved into the Wendy's storage unit. Inside, they unearthed a cardboard box, its flaps carelessly left open, revealing a bottle of the deadly chemical, sodium azide. More containers of the lethal substance, everyday items like Q-tips, a plastic knife and fork, and latex gloves were also found. Disturbingly, Wendy's fingerprints were unmistakably present on the plastic knife and the box's packaging. Back at the apartment, a more sinister discovery awaited. Hidden amongst seemingly harmless herbal supplements, gelatin capsules filled with sodium azide were unearthed. The kitchen bore further evidence of the deadly substance, with traces found in a pot and 2 soup bowls. Wendy's search history also showed that she had researched this chemical and the effects it would have to slowly and painfully kill a human being. Alarmingly, a significant amount of the chemical remained unaccounted for, suggesting that Wendi may have been poisoning her already ill husband. Wendi was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder. Following her arrest, Wendi reached out to a colleague, requesting her to hide specific objects located in Wendi's office at work. On the day of the crime, Wendi's adoptive father confided to a police detective, recalling, "I recall Wendi mentioning that she had stabbed Joe." Wendi's version of events depicted her as the victim, claiming Joe was an abusive husband. She told police and testified as her own witness that Joe did not want to continue to live in pain. He wanted her to help him with assisted suicide, that they had planned to use the poison to help him pass away, and when she confessed to her affairs that night, he got violent. She claimed self-defense and that the struggle with the knife ended in him stabbing himself in the neck. At Wendi's trial, prosecutors sought the death penalty. Several contributing factors that swayed the jury were the inconsistencies in her story of events. Paramedics and Chris, her co-worker, physically saw how weak her husband was when she first called 911. There is no way he had enough strength to try to physically harm Wendi. Coupled with her failed life insurance attempts, affairs, and attempt to hide evidence, Wendi also believed she could get as much as $20 million from a medical malpractice lawsuit filed against Joe's doctors. At the trial, the prosecuting attorney, Juan Martinez, depicted Wendi as a covetous wife who was unfaithful. He asserted that she administered the pesticide to her husband through fake supplements and added it to his food, inflicted a deep cut to his neck, and violently struck his head, accelerating his demise in a profoundly malevolent manner. Martinez argued that Andriano attempted to misrepresent her 33-year-old husband's death on October 8, 2000, as a cardiac arrest to benefit financially from a malpractice lawsuit. Defending herself and testifying over 9 days, Wendi contended that she had been subjected to physical abuse by her spouse. 34-year-old Wendi Andriano was handed a death sentence by the jury. They communicated that their decision was split and sought guidance from Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Brian Ishikawa on the protocol if a unanimous decision couldn't be reached. In a motion for a retrial dated December 29th, defense lawyer Dan Patterson argued that Judge Ishikawa made a mistake by providing the jury with a note offering suggestions to overcome their evident deadlock. Upon hearing the jury's decision for the death penalty on December 22, 2005, a tearful Wendi became the second female to be placed on Arizona's death row. Wendi continues to appeal her sentence and is still on death row. This case is truly heart-wrenching for Joe and his family. Not only have their 2 children been orphaned, but Joe thought he had more time to say his goodbyes. His family said the trial has not brought them closure. His mother stated, "I don't think I'll ever get over this. We're going to go on with our lives. We have faith in God. We have friends and family who have really supported us." What are your thoughts on today's story? Do you believe Wendi? Or do you think the jury got it right? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more stories like this one. Thanks for watching.